Hello and welcome to the wicked webs we weave. I am your host, Ryan Mckern. Welcome back, my friends, to more tales of haunted history, true crime, and all things horror. Sit back and welcome to the wicked webs we weave. Join me once again, my friends, for your consideration. Bourbon Street, New Orleans, in the French Quarter. I used to work on Bourbon Street many years ago at Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo. The spirits within that house is just so amazing to feel. It's so positive, so much energy. The altars, everything that resonates. But you were probably more familiar with Bourbon Street being the debaucherous party zone that it certainly is. Beyond Mardi Gras, it still holds that dance party flavor 24/7. And the clientele it draws can be unsavory at times. However, I stay away from Bourbon Street except for this one place. And that is one of the oldest bars in the country, Lafitte's Blacksmith shop. Also serves as a piano bar at nighttime, and it's quite fun. The crowd is definitely different than your average Bourbon Street bar, so I highly recommend it. Tonight's tale, Lafitte's, will explore the pirate himself, hauntings within, and other historic accounts of this notorious establishment. And the unforgettable story of New Orleans' resident pirate. If you lived in New Orleans in the late 1700s, you have surely known about the Lafitte brothers, Jean and Pierre, who ran a rather profitable smuggling operation out of New Orleans. Their legend takes us to a little ramshackle bar on Bourbon Street, known these days as Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar. With its briquettes, entree portiere brique, and its slated roof, entering Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop feels much like a passage back to New Orleans history. A time one cannot help but be fascinated by, even with all its rough edges and uglier truths laid bare. Jean Lafitte is one of the New Orleans historical figures whose true story has become better than anything fiction could write. He was called the Terror of the Gulf and the hero of New Orleans, and perhaps most romantic of all, the Prince of Pirates. If contemporary accounts are true, he was probably a pirate much of like Captain Jack Sparrow variety, a man shrouded in just enough mystery to keep his admirers wanting more, a rock star of sorts. His reputation was that of a handsome, intelligent, and charming, we even venture, debonair man. Barbarouses are benevolent, one thing is sure about Jean Lafitte. His story has become irrevocably tied to New Orleans, and much like Marie Laveau, his name is a veritable institution in the city, with everything from coffee brands to bed and breakfast named after him. But who was Jean Lafitte, really? Pirate or patriot? One thing seems certain, Lafitte did not appreciate being called a pirate. He much preferred the name privateer. While one could split hairs on the terminology all day, it boils down to this. Privateers worked for governments, so their plundering was more or less more socially acceptable than their pirate peers. So how should history paint Jean Lafitte? Was he a villain or a hero? Perhaps this is the best answered by imagining yourself a newcomer to New Orleans during Lafitte's era. Your reasons for migrating to a place plagued with yellow fever and mosquitoes might be dubious at best. Perhaps you had a bit of tempestuous past back home. Maybe you even served a bit of time in prison. Whatever your story was, you probably stood a chance of finding a new career with Jean Lafitte. He was sure to give you a job in his plundering band of buccaneers. Lafitte's operation extended to the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and even the vast network of New Orleans waterways. They searched for treasures all types, spoons, fabric, gold, and what they shamefully called black ivory, their way of referring to slaves, one of their most valuable commodities. Lafitte provided goods to a growing city in desperate need of them. This made him popular. He was also known to be a man of certain codes of honor. His self-made kingdom by the sea prevented him from dishonoring the laws of the land, at least technically speaking. He became somewhat of a patriotic legend when he received an offer from the British government to fight against the Americans. The British offered his rather powerful Barataria network a handsome £30,000 sterling silver to help them infiltrate New Orleans. After all, did anyone know the dangers that lurked in the city's swamps and waterways better than Jean Lafitte? Jean Lafitte considered the offer and promptly offered his services to the American government. The Americans returned the favor by storming one of his outposts, even capturing several of his schooners. Needless to say, the relationship between Lafitte and America was rocky, but eventually Captain Andrew Jackson saw Lafitte's value. In the ensuing Battle of New Orleans, Lafitte's role in American history was forever cast. His band of brigades would prove essential to the war efforts. Afterward, however, Lafitte was unable to stay in New Orleans. Perhaps his reputation as a pirate finally caught up to him. He ended up in Galveston, Texas, where he set up another kingdom by the sea, married, and by all accounts lived a rather lavish lifestyle. But Lafitte's ghost seemed to take up permanent residence in New Orleans, and if you want to meet the man himself, perhaps your best bet is to venture into the oldest operating bar in America, Lafitte's Blacksmith Bar. Grab one of the famous voodoo juices from the bar. Take a seat near the fireplace. Of all seats in the bar, it might be the best choice to encounter an apparition or two. You might even meet Lafitte's ghost. Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Ghostly Apparitions. The most famous ghost of Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop is that of the pirate himself. And incredibly, unlike so many other New Orleans ghosts, it seems Lafitte prefers to make himself known as a full-bodied apparition. None of these spectral visions or misty apparitions of other New Orleans ghosts, as he lived his life, bold and daring, it seems so his ghost has lived on. He may not speak to you, but you might catch a glimpse of him at the darkened corners. His spirit is said to have a particular preference for the ladies, and if you are in the woman's restroom, you might feel a pinch or two from the ghost of Jean Lafitte. But if Lafitte is the friendly ghost of Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop, the fireplace holds an entirely different kind of paranormal encounter. This one is said to be less friendly, some even call it demonic. Visitors speak, some even call it them within the fireplace. It is said that there is treasure hiding amongst the blaze inside the fireplace. Is the ghost simply protecting a secret lost to time? I invite you to order a cocktail and find out for yourself. If you were to wander down the streets of the French Quarter at the midnight hour, after the haunted New Orleans ghost tours, at night, you might have the streets shrouded in fog. The lanterns might barely illuminate the dim streets. Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop beckons you, as well as Pirate's Alley, a pirate bar also sits beside St. Louis Cathedral. If you see me there, sit down and say hi. We'll have a glass of absinthe and recall the tales of pirates in the French Quarter. I would like to thank nightlyspirits.com as well as ghostcitytours.com. The books of John Lafitte, The Pirates of New Orleans. On to the next story. Next we explore New Orleans' most famous serial killer, the Axeman of New Orleans. Who'll be next is the question being asked by detectives and Italians of New Orleans, which would be printed in the Times-Picayune back in the early 1900s. For over a year, from May 1918 to October 1919, the city of New Orleans, Louisiana was in a frenzied panic over a roaming serial killer dubbed the Axeman. The first to succumb to the sharp blade of the American Axeman was an Italian grocer named Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine on May 23, 1918. As they lay sleeping in their apartment above the Maggio grocery store, the killer cut the couple's throats with a straight razor before bashing their heads in with an axe. When law enforcement began to investigate, they found the bloody clothes of the murderer. As he had obviously changed into a clean set of clothes before fleeing the scene, police ruled out robbery as motivation of the attacks, as money and valuables left in plain sight were not stolen by the intruder. Near the couple's home, a message written in chalk read, "Miss Joseph Maggio will sit up tonight. Just write Miss Tony." Investigators immediately questioned several people, but all were released for lack of evidence. Little more than a month later, another couple was attacked in the early morning hours on June 27, 1918. Louis Bezumer, a grocer, and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, lived in quarters at the back of the store. When no one opened the store in the morning, they were discovered lying in a pool of blood. Bezumer had been struck with an axe above his right temple, and Lowe was attacked over the left ear. Though badly injured, both were still alive. Once again, people were questioned and one man arrested, but they later released him. Though the crime made the newspapers, of bigger note to some was the scandal of the mistress. After the attack, one side of Lowe's face was partially paralyzed, and on August 5th, she had surgery performed in an effort to correct it. 2 days later, she died. But before she passed, she told authorities that she suspected it was Louis Bezumer who had attacked her. Bezumer was then charged with the murder and served 9 months in prison before being acquitted on May 1st, 1919, after a 10-minute jury deliberation. On August 5th, a similar attack was made on a Miss Edward Schneider, who was 8 months pregnant. As the 28-year-old lay in bed, she awoke to see a dark figure standing over her and was bashed in the face repeatedly. Shortly after midnight, she was discovered by her husband, who was just returning home from work. Her scalp had been cut open, and her face was completely covered in blood. But she survived the attack to give birth to a healthy girl 2 days later. One man was arrested in suspicion, but soon released for lack of evidence. By this time, investigations began to quickly publicly speculate that the attack was related in the previous incidents involving Pasumer and Maggio. Just 5 days later, yet another grocer, a man named Joseph Romano, was attacked on August 10th. The elderly grocer lived his two nieces, who awoke in the sound of a commotion in the adjoining room where their uncle resided. The girls entered Romano's room to find that he had taken a serious blow to the head and saw that the assailant was fleeing. The grocer, though seriously injured, was able to walk to the ambulance once it arrived, but he died 2 days later due to severe head trauma. The girls were able to provide a brief description of the killer, a dark-skinned, heavy-set man who wore a dark suit and slouched hat. Other clues of the crime were similar to the previous ones, such as the scenes were of 10 ransacked, but nothing ever stolen. That the killer used the owner's hatchets and blades in the crimes. The parallels of doors and windows were chiseled away to give entry, and that the majority of the victims were Italian. Yet another in a series of murders, and as assaults by the Axeman created sweeping fear in the city, police were inundated with reports from citizens claiming to have seen an Axeman lurking in neighborhoods, axes, chisels found in backyards, and doors and windows that appeared to have been tampered. People began to carry loaded shotguns, and family members took turns watching over their families at night. One report alleged that the Axeman was masquerading as a woman, another that he had been leaping over a back fence. The people were afraid, determined to protect themselves, and bordered on panic. But perhaps the heat generated that terror was somehow transferred to the Axeman, as the killings and assaults stopped as quickly as they had started. Over the months, the fear waned and the neighborhoods returned to normal until March 10th, 1919, when the Axeman struck again. Charles Corlemiglia was an immigrant and grocer who lived with his wife, Rosie, and 2-year-old daughter, Mary, in the town of Gretna, just across the Mississippi River from New Orleans. When screams were heard coming from the Cordelia residence in the early morning hours, neighboring grocer Lorando Giordano rushed across the street to investigate. There he found that the three had been attacked. Rosie had awakened to find her husband struggling with a large man wielding an axe. When her husband fell to the floor, the assailant turned on her, as she had her daughter, and begged for their lives. Undaunted, the killer slammed the axe down on both mother and the daughter. When the neighbor arrived, Charles lay in a pool of blood on the floor, as Rosie stood on the doorway with a serious head wound, clutching her deceased daughter. The couple was rushed to the hospital, where both were treated for skull fractures. Charles released 2 days later, while his wife remained in care of the doctors, and the daughter is deceased. Upon gaining full consciousness, Rosie stated that the attack was made by neighboring grocer Lorlando Giordano and his 18-year-old son, Frank. Though Lorlando, a 69-year-old man, was in too poor of health to have committed the crimes, and Frank Giordano was too big to have fit through the panel in the back door that was missing in order for the killer to enter. The pair was arrested, though. Charles denied his wife's claims. The Giordano's were charged with the murders and later would be found guilty. Frank was sentenced to hang, and his father, life in prison. After the trial, Charles divorced his wife. About a year later, Rosie Cormiglia reversed their claim, stating that she had falsely accused the two out of jealousy and spite, with her claim being the only one evidence against the Giordanos, and they were released from jail shortly thereafter. Following the Cormiglia murders, New Orleans was again filled with terror, and once again, to arm themselves, the police stated that they had believed all the crimes to have been committed by the same man, a bloodthirsty maniac filled with a passion for manslaughter that quoted. Then a new twist came upon the scene when the Time-Picayune paper received a taunting letter on March 14th, 1919, that promised another attack. Hell, March 13th, 1919. Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit in a demonic form, the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims, I alone whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, and besmeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish to tell the police to be careful not to ride me, of course. I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way they have conducted their investigation in the past. In fact, they have been so utterly stupid as to not only amuse me, but His Satanic Majesty Francis Joseph, etc. But tell them to beware. Let them try not to discover who I am, for it was better that they were never born than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I don't think there is any need for such a warning, for I feel sure the police will always dodge me, as they have in the past. They are wise and know how to keep away from all harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think me as the most horrible murderer, which I am. But I could be much worse, if I wanted to, if I wished. I could pay a visit to your city every night, at will. I could slay thousands of your best local citizens, for I'm in close relationship with the Angel of Death. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time, on next Tuesday night, March 19th, 1919, I'm going to pass over New Orleans in my infinite mercy. I'm going to make a little proposition for you people, and here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the ether realms that every person shall be spared in those whose home a jazz band is full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, is that some of you people who do not jazz it on Tuesday nights, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of the narrative Tartarus, and it's about time I leave your earthly home, I will cease my discourse, hoping that thou wilt publish this, that it may go on well with thee. I have been, and I will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or realm of fancy. The Axeman. Per the killer's statement that no one listening to jazz on March 19th would get the axe, the music flowed from homes across much of the city. Dance halls were filled in capacity, and professional and amateur bands played jazz at parties at hundreds of houses around town, and no one was killed. For several weeks, all was quiet. People still lived in fear. On August 10th, 1919, another grocer named Steve Boca was attacked in his bedroom as he slept. Boca awoke during the night to find a dark figure looming over his bed. Suffering from a blow from an axe, he survived, and upon regaining consciousness, he ran to the home of his neighbor Frank Gumoisa, where he lost consciousness and collapsed. He was treated for his injuries, but was unable to remember the details of the attack. Like others who had been assailed from the Axeman, nothing was taken from his home, and a panel on the back door of the home had been chiseled away. On September 2nd, a local druggist named William Carson escaped the lethal Axeman when he fired several shots at an intruder who had broken into his home. The killer left a broken door and an axe behind. On September 3rd, 1919, a young girl named Sarah Lumarni was attacked with an axe while she slept in her locked and shuttered home. When neighbors came to check on the young woman who had lived alone, they discovered the lying unconscious of her bed, suffering from a severe head injury and missing several teeth. Though she suffered from a brain concussion, she did recover. A bloody axe was discovered in the front lawn of the building. Once again, New Orleans was in a state of hysteria, but nothing would be heard from the Axeman for nearly 2 months. The last attack came on October 27th, 1919, when grocer Mike Papitones was slain. That night his wife had heard a noise and arrived at the door of the bedroom just as a large, axe-wielding man was fleeing the scene. Pepitone was struck in the head and was covered in his own blood. His murder left his wife and 6 children behind. Miss Pepitone, the mother of 6 children, was unable to describe any characteristics of the killer. The unusual clues had been left behind. The authorities continued to work on the case, but it would be in vain. Pepitone's murder was the last known of the Axeman killer. He was never seen or heard from in New Orleans again. The case remains a cold case to this day. Thank you again for joining me this evening in the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. I would like to thank legendsofamerica.com for research on that story, and to the aforementioned websites earlier as the research of the John Lafitte. Well, enjoy your cocktails in New Orleans, my friend, until we meet again. I am your host, Ryan Mckern. Au revoir.